My son was dying right in front of my eyes, and no one seemed to notice but me. Then my 12-year-old grandson slipped me a crumbled note under the dinner table that said, "Grandpa, check the storage unit Dad rented. Unit 247. You need to see what is inside before Friday." So I went to check, and I screamed when I saw what my son had been hiding. If you are listening to this right now, take a deep breath, because what I am about to tell you is a nightmare that no father should ever have to witness. My name is Henry Sullivan. I am 70 years old, and I spent 40 years as an insurance fraud investigator. I made a living looking into people's eyes and knowing exactly when they were lying. I thought I had seen the absolute worst of human nature. I thought I had retired from looking for the ugly truth. But I was wrong. The ugliest truth was waiting for me at my own son's dining table. Before I continue this story, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. It helps me share this warning with other families. And let me know in the comments where you are watching from. I read every single one. It was a Tuesday night in Seattle, and the rain was hammering against the windows of my son Leo's house like it was trying to break in. The house was a modern masterpiece of glass and steel in the wealthy Queen Anne neighborhood. It was the kind of house that shouted success. But inside, the air was so heavy and cold, it felt like a funeral parlor. I sat at the head of the mahogany table. To my right sat Tanya, my daughter-in-law. She looked immaculate. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight, flawless bun, and she was wearing a silk dress that cost more than my first car. She was cutting into a medium-rare steak, sipping red wine, and chatting about her upcoming charity gala. She looked like she was posing for a magazine cover. To my left sat Leo, my son, the boy I had raised on my own after my wife passed away, the genius software engineer who had built a $50 million company from a garage. But the man sitting next to me was not the Leo I knew. He was a shell, a ghost. Leo was 40 years old, but that night he looked 80. His skin was the color of wet ash. His eyes, usually so sharp and full of life, were sunken deep into his skull, surrounded by dark purple bruises. He was not eating steak. He had a bowl of lukewarm broth in front of him. His hand was shaking so violently that the spoon kept clicking against the side of the ceramic bowl. Click, click, click. It was the only sound in the room besides Tanya's voice. "Oh, stop it, Leo!" Tanya snapped, suddenly dropping her fork. Her voice was not loud, but it was sharp like a whip. "You are making a mess again." Leo flinched. He actually flinched like a beaten dog. "I am sorry," he whispered. His voice was raspy and weak. "My hand. I cannot control it." I clenched my fists under the table. The old instinct, the investigator in me, was screaming. This was not right. 2 months ago, Leo was running marathons. Now he could not lift a spoon. Tanya let out a long, exaggerated sigh. She picked up a napkin and reached over to wipe Leo's mouth. She did it aggressively, pushing his head back slightly. "Honestly, Leo, it is exhausting watching you struggle like this. Dr. Reeves said you need to try harder to focus. It is all in your head." That was enough. I slammed my hand down on the table. The wine glasses rattled. "Enough, Tanya," I growled. "Look at him. He is not doing this on purpose. He is emaciated. He needs a hospital, not a lecture on focus." Tanya froze. She slowly turned her head to look at me, and her eyes were ice cold. There was no fear in them, only annoyance. "We have been over this, Henry," she said, using my first name instead of Dad, which she knew I hated. "We have the best concierge doctor in the state coming to the house daily. Dr. Reeves says this is just a side effect of the new anxiety medication. Leo is having a mental breakdown, Henry. He is paranoid. He is delusional. The tremors are psychosomatic." I looked at Leo. He was staring at his broth, tears silently rolling down his gray cheeks. "Is that true, Leo?" I asked softly. "Do you feel anxious?" Leo opened his mouth to speak, but Tanya cut in smoothly. "Do not stress him out, Henry. He had an episode this morning where he forgot who I was. He was screaming about people stealing his money. It was embarrassing. The neighbors heard. She took a sip of her wine, hiding a smirk behind the crystal glass. I watched her throat move as she swallowed. My gut churned. I knew a liar when I saw one. She was enjoying this. She was feeding off his weakness. At the end of the table sat my grandson, Noah. He was 12 years old, and usually he was a ball of energy, constantly talking about video games and soccer. Tonight, he was silent. He had not touched his food. He was wearing a hoodie with the hood pulled up, casting a shadow over his face. He kept darting his eyes from his father to his mother, and then to me. His eyes were wide with terror. The atmosphere was suffocating. I picked up my knife to cut my meat, but I had lost my appetite. I felt helpless. Every time I suggested a second opinion, Tanya had a legal document or a doctor's note ready to shut me down. She had power of attorney over his health decisions. I was just the old man in the way. Suddenly there was a loud clatter. Leo had dropped his spoon completely. It splashed broth all over the white tablecloth. "Oh, for God's sake!" Tanya yelled, standing up. She looked at the stain with pure hatred. "That is Belgian linen, Leo. Can you not do anything right anymore?" Leo was trembling so hard his wheelchair shook. "I am sorry," he gasped, hyperventilating. "I am sorry, Tanya." I stood up to go to him, but Tanya held up a hand. "Sit down, Henry," she ordered. "I will handle him. Noah, go get the cleaning supplies. Now." Noah jumped out of his chair, but instead of running to the kitchen, he dropped his own fork. It clattered to the floor and slid under the heavy table. "Oops," Noah mumbled. "Sorry, Mom. I will get it." Tanya rolled her eyes, focusing her anger on blotting the stain on the tablecloth. Noah dove under the table. I felt a small cold hand grab my knee. I froze. Noah was under there, fumbling around near my legs. Then I felt it. A small, tight ball of paper being pressed firmly into my palm. Noah squeezed my hand once hard and desperate. Then he crawled out from the other side, holding his fork. "Got it," he said, his voice trembling slightly. I kept my hand closed tight around the paper. My heart started pounding against my ribs. I looked at Noah. He was back in his seat, staring down at his plate, but he gave me a barely perceptible nod. "I need to use the restroom," I said, keeping my voice steady. Tanya did not even look at me. She was busy pouring herself another glass of wine, ignoring her husband, who was still apologizing in a whisper. "Just be quick, Henry," she said dismissively. "We need to clear the table soon." I walked down the hallway, my legs feeling heavy. I went into the guest bathroom and locked the door. I turned on the faucet to drown out any sound. My hands were shaking as I unrolled the piece of paper. It was a page torn from a school notebook. The handwriting was messy, hurried, like it had been written in the dark. "Grandpa. Check storage unit 247 on Pike Street. Dad rented it secretly. You need to see what is inside before Friday. Do not let Mom know. She is lying about the medicine." I stared at the note. Before Friday. Today was Wednesday. Friday was the court hearing for Leo's competency evaluation. If Tanya won on Friday, she would have full control over Leo's estate and his life. I looked in the mirror. The face staring back at me was old and tired, but the eyes were sharp. They were the eyes of the man who had brought down crime rings and exposed million-dollar scams. I flushed the toilet, but I put the note in my inside jacket pocket. I washed my face with cold water. When I walked back into the dining room, Tanya was smiling. A fake plastic smile. "Everything okay, Henry?" she asked. I forced a smile back. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. "Fine," I said. "Just old age catching up with me." I sat down and looked at Leo. He was slumped over in his wheelchair, barely conscious. I looked at Tanya, who was checking her phone. "You have no idea what is coming for you," I thought. I finished my dinner in silence, planning my next move. As soon as I could leave without raising suspicion, I was going to Pike Street. I had to know what was in Unit 247, and I had a feeling that whatever was in there was going to tear this family apart. The rain was coming down in sheets now, blurring the streetlights into streaks of fractured white. I had driven my old sedan across the city, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. The note from Noah was burning a hole in my pocket. I kept replaying the look in his eyes, that pure, unfiltered terror. A 12-year-old should not know that kind of fear. A 12-year-old should be worried about math tests and soccer practice, not slipping secret messages to his grandfather to save his father from dying. I pulled up to the gate of the Pike Street self-storage facility. It was a desolate place, a concrete graveyard of forgotten belongings, sitting on the edge of the industrial district. The security gate was rusted, and the keypad looked like it had not been cleaned since the 90s. I rolled down my window, and the cold rain instantly soaked my sleeve. I punched in the code Noah had scribbled on the back of the note. Access denied. The red light blinked at me, mocking me. I tried again, typing slower this time, my fingers trembling slightly. Access denied. Panic started to rise in my chest, a cold, hard lump. Was I too late? Had Tanya found out and changed the code? Then I remembered something Leo used to do. Whenever he set passwords for anything important, he always used the date his mother died. It was his way of keeping her memory close, he said. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes for a second, and typed it in. The gate groaned and slowly shuddered open. I drove through, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. Unit 247 was at the very end of a long, dark row of identical metal doors. The only light came from a flickering bulb overhead that cast long, dancing shadows against the wet pavement. I parked the car and got out, the wind instantly whipping my coat around my legs. I was 70 years old, and the cold seeped into my bones faster than it used to, but tonight I did not feel the chill. I only felt a burning urgency. The padlock on the door was heavy, a serious piece of hardware, not the cheap ones you buy at the hardware store. Leo had not just rented a storage unit, he had built a fortress. I used the key I had found taped under the passenger seat of my car, just like the note said. It turned with a satisfying click. I grabbed the handle of the roll-up door and pulled. It was heavier than I expected, and for a moment I thought my old back would give out. I gritted my teeth, groaning with the effort, pulling with everything I had left. The metal screeched against the tracks, a sound that seemed deafening in the empty night. Slowly, inch by agonizing inch, the door rose. I was expecting boxes. I was expecting old furniture, maybe some files or computer servers. What I saw made my breath catch in my throat. It was not a storage unit. It was a sterile white room. Leo had lined the walls with insulation and bright fluorescent lights that hummed to life as the door opened fully. In the center of the room sat a hospital bed stripped of its sheets. Next to it was a dialysis machine, its tubes hanging limp and empty like dead snakes. On a metal table there were rows of pill bottles, some with labels, some without, and a centrifuge used for separating blood samples. My son, the software genius, had turned a storage locker into a clandestine medical lab. "Why, Leo?" I whispered to the empty room. "Why did you not come to me?" I stepped inside, the air smelling of antiseptic and ozone. It was freezing in there, colder than outside. I walked over to the desk in the corner. It was covered in papers, stacks of them. I picked up the top one. It was a bank statement, but not for Leo's main accounts. It was for an offshore account in the Cayman Islands under Tanya's maiden name. The balance was zero. All the money, millions of dollars, had been transferred out 2 days ago. I flipped through the pages, my hands shaking harder now. There were emails, printed out emails between Tanya and Dr. Reeves. "I am increasing the dosage," she wrote in one. "He is starting to suspect. Make it look like a stroke." I felt sick. Physically sick. I had to grab the edge of the desk to steady myself. This was not just about money. This was murder. premeditated, cold-blooded murder. I looked up, and that is when I saw it. On the far wall, there was a large whiteboard covered in Leo's frantic handwriting. It looked like the mind of a madman, at first glance, arrows connecting names, dates, and chemical formulas. But as I stepped closer, the pattern emerged. It was a timeline of his symptoms. Week 1, nausea and dizziness. Tanya starts making my protein shakes. Week 2, tremors begin. Dr. Reeves prescribes benzodiazepines. Symptoms worsen. Week 3, memory loss. Tanya takes over finances. And right in the center of the board, written in red marker so hard the tip had broken, was the sentence that shattered my heart. My wife is poisoning me slowly. She thinks I do not know, but I am dying anyway. I let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. It was a primal noise, a sound of pure grief and rage that I did not know I was capable of making. My son, my brilliant, kind, gentle son, had been suffering alone in this cold metal box, trying to solve the mystery of his own murder while his body failed him. He had been fighting for his life while I sat at his dinner table making polite conversation with his killer. I turned to grab the evidence to sweep the papers and the bottles into my bag, but a flash of lightning illuminated the doorway. A shadow fell across the floor. I froze. I was not alone. The sound of heavy boots on wet pavement crunched behind me. I spun around, clutching the stack of papers to my chest like a shield. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the storm, was a figure in a security guard uniform. But he was not holding a flashlight. He was holding a baton, and he was tapping it rhythmically against his leg. "You are not supposed to be here, Mr. Sullivan." The voice was deep and menacing. "Mrs. Sullivan said you might come snooping." "Run!" The instinct screamed in my head. I was 70 years old, but I had spent my life chasing bad guys. I scanned the room. There was no back exit. The only way out was past him. I looked at the fire extinguisher mounted on the wall next to me. It was heavy red, and my only chance. The guard stepped into the light, and I saw his face. It was not a stranger. It was the bouncer from the club Tanya used to frequent years ago. She had hired her own muscle to guard her secrets. He grinned, showing yellow teeth. "Give me the papers, old man, and maybe you can walk out of here. Or maybe you will just have a nasty fall. Old people fall all the time, do they not?" I did not think. I did not hesitate. I grabbed the fire extinguisher, ripped it off the wall, and hurled it not at him, but at the stack of chemical bottles on the shelf next to him. Glass shattered, fumes erupted. The guard coughed, shielding his face for a split second. That was all I needed. I bolted. I ran past him, my shoulder checking him hard, knocking him off balance. I sprinted out into the rain, my lungs burning my legs, screaming in protest. I did not look back. I threw myself into my car, locked the doors, and jammed the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life just as the guard slammed his fist against my window. I floored it. The tires spun on the wet asphalt, screeching, then caught traction. I sped away from Unit 247, leaving the gate open, leaving the light on, leaving the truth exposed to the storm. I had the papers. I had the diary. But as I looked in my rearview mirror, I saw headlights turn on behind me. They were following me. The hunt was on. And I knew with terrifying certainty that if they caught me tonight, I would never make it to Friday. I would just be another tragic accident, another old man who died too soon. But they had made one mistake. They thought they were hunting prey. They did not realize they had just woken up a predator. I reached for my phone to call for help, but the screen was black. Dead battery. I was alone in the dark with a killer on my tail, and the evidence that could save my son burning a hole in the passenger seat. I gripped the wheel and drove into the night, ready for war. I sat in my kitchen staring at the black coffee in my mug, watching the steam rise and twist in the cold morning air. My hands were finally steady, but my heart was still hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I had made it home. I had hidden Leo's diary and the stack of financial records inside the lining of my old leather armchair in the living room. It was a hiding spot I had used for 20 years to stash emergency cash, and it was the only place I felt was safe. I had not slept a wink. Every time a car passed by outside, I flinched, expecting to see the police or that thug security guard coming to finish what he started. But the sun had risen gray and unforgiving over Seattle, and I was still alive. Then the knock came. It was not a polite tap. It was 3 sharp, authoritative raps on the front door. I froze. I looked at the clock on the microwave. 7 in the morning. No one visits at 7 in the morning unless it is bad news. I took a deep breath, shuffled my feet to look as weary as possible, and walked to the door. I opened it and my stomach dropped. Tanya was standing on my porch. She was not wearing her gala dress anymore. She was wearing a simple beige sweater and jeans, looking like the picture of a worried suburban mother. Her eyes were red and puffy, as if she had been crying all night. Standing right behind her, looming like a dark shadow, was Dr. Reeves. He was wearing a sharp gray suit that looked like it cost more than my house, and he was holding a thick manila folder. Henry, Tanya choked out. Her voice cracked perfectly. "Thank God you are awake. We need to talk." I stepped back, holding the door open. "Come in," I said, keeping my voice rough and tired. "Is it Leo? Is he okay?" Tanya walked past me, bringing a wave of expensive perfume that masked the scent of my stale coffee. She sat down at my small kitchen table and buried her face in her hands. Dr. Reeves nodded at me stiffly and closed the door. He did not sit. He stood by the window watching the street. He was casing the place. I knew it. He was checking if I was alone. "Mr. Sullivan," Dr. Reeves began, his voice smooth and calming, the kind of voice used to sell expensive treatments to desperate people. "We know you went to the storage unit last night." I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge so he would not see my hands shaking. "I did," I said. I was worried. Noah gave me a note. Tanya looked up, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, Henry. Noah is just a child. He does not understand what is happening. He is confused because Leo is confused." "What do you mean?" I asked, playing the part of the ignorant old man. "I saw things in there, Tanya. I saw medical equipment. I saw a timeline. Leo thinks you are poisoning him." Tanya let out a sob that sounded so painful I almost believed it myself. Poisoning him. "Henry, look at me. I love him. I have spent every penny we have trying to save him." Dr. Reeves stepped forward and placed the manila folder on the table. He slid it toward me. "Open it, Mr. Sullivan. Please. You need to see the truth." I opened the folder. Inside were official-looking medical documents with complicated headers and logos from prestigious labs. There were toxicology reports, brain scans, and psychiatric evaluations. "Leo is not being poisoned," Dr. Reeves said softly. "Leo is an addict, Henry, and he is suffering from severe paranoid schizophrenia induced by substance abuse." I looked at the papers. They showed high levels of methamphetamine and synthetic opioids in Leo's blood. They showed brain scans with dark spots that Reeves pointed to with a manicured finger. The storage unit was not a lab to investigate us. Reeves continued. "It was a manufacturing room. Leo has been brewing his own compounds, Henry. He has been mixing crushed painkillers with industrial solvents, trying to create a cure for a disease he does not have. The fumes in that unit. That is what is making him sick. That is what is causing the tremors and the memory loss. He is poisoning himself." I stared at him. It was a brilliant lie. It explained everything I saw in the unit, but twisted it just enough to make Leo the villain and them the heroes. The pills, the centrifuge, the frantic writing on the wall. If I did not know better, if I had not seen the diary entries about the thallium, I would have believed them. Tanya reached out and grabbed my hand. Her palms were cold. Henry, we are trying to get him into a residential facility on Friday. That is what the court hearing is for. It is not to take his money. It is to force him into rehab. If we do not get legal guardianship, he will kill himself with those chemicals. You saw the unit. You saw how crazy it looked. Do you want your son to die because of a delusion? I looked down at the fake reports. I felt a surge of rage so hot, it almost burned my throat. They were gaslighting me. They were turning my son's fight for survival into a story of madness. They were going to lock him up, drug him until his brain melted, and steal everything he built. But I knew I could not fight them now. Not here. Not 2 against 1 with no weapon. I had to make them believe they had won. I had to make them think I was just a scared, confused father who accepted their superior medical knowledge. I slumped my shoulders, letting my body sag. I rubbed my eyes. I did not know I whispered. I did not know it was drugs. He was always such a good boy. Tanya squeezed my hand harder. I know, Henry. It breaks my heart too, but we have to be strong. We have to save him from himself. Dr. Reeves relaxed. I saw the tension leave his shoulders. He thought I bought it. He thought he had outsmarted the old insurance investigator. So the security guard, Tanya asked, wiping her eyes. He said you ran away. He said you took some papers. Henry, those papers are just the ramblings of a sick mind. But if the police find them, they could charge Leo with manufacturing narcotics. We need them back, to protect him. This was the trap. If I gave them the papers, I lost my evidence. If I refused, they would know I was lying. I dropped them, I lied. My voice trembled, and this time I did not have to fake it. When that man chased me, I was terrified. I think I dropped them in the parking lot, or maybe the car. I was just trying to get away. I threw the rest in the trash bin by the gas station on 4th Street. I just wanted it to be over. Dr. Reeves narrowed his eyes, studying my face. He was looking for the tick, the twitch that signals a lie. I held his gaze, letting my eyes fill with the genuine fear I felt for my son. After a long silence, Reeves nodded. It is probably for the best, he said. We will have a crew clean out the unit today. Destroy the chemicals safely. No one needs to know about Leo's little Breaking Bad phase. Tanya stood up, smoothing her sweater. Thank you for being reasonable, Henry. I know this is hard, but on Friday we will get him the help he needs. Please just stay home and rest. Let us handle the lawyers. She kissed me on the cheek. Her lips felt like dry ice. We will see ourselves out, Reeves said. I watched them walk to the door. I stood there feeling small and defeated, waiting for them to leave so I could breathe again. Dr. Reeves reached for the doorknob. And that is when I saw it. Reeves paused to open the door, and as he shifted his weight, I looked down at his shoes. They were expensive Italian leather loafers polished to a shine, except for the heel. Caked deep into the ridge of his left heel was a chunk of thick, reddish-brown mud. It was not the black soil of my garden. It was not the gray grit of the city streets. It was red clay. Heavy industrial red clay. The kind of clay that is only found in one specific part of Seattle. The riverbanks near the industrial district. Specifically, the unpaved construction zone directly behind the Pike Street storage facility. My breath hitched. They had lied about everything. They said they sent a crew. But Reeves had been there himself. He had been there last night, probably right after I left. He had walked through the mud in the rain to oversee the destruction of the evidence. He had been standing in that room where my son was dying, erasing the truth with his own hands. They did not just know about the unit. They had purged it. Henry, Tanya called from the doorway. Are you coming? I snapped my head up. No, I said quickly. No, I will just lock up. Take care, Mr. Sullivan, Reeves said. He stepped out, and the red mud on his shoe left a tiny faint smear on my hardwood floor. A crumb of evidence in my own home. I closed the door and locked it. I waited until I heard Tanya's car engine fade down the street. Then I dropped to my knees. I stared at that small smudge of red clay. It was the only proof I had that they were lying about their timeline. They thought they had neutralized me. They thought I was a senile old man who threw the evidence in a trash can. They thought they had until Friday to finish Leo off. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my flip phone. It was old, but it had a camera. I took a picture of the mud stain. Then I stood up and walked to the armchair. I reached inside the lining and pulled out the diary. "You made a mistake, Doctor," I whispered to the empty room. "You walked into my house with the crime scene on your shoes, and now I know exactly where you were last night." I was not going to rest. I was not going to stay home. I had a sample of Leo's hair in my jacket pocket from the hug I gave him yesterday. And I knew a private lab technician who owed me a favor from a fraud case back in '99. The game was not over. It was just beginning. And I had 48 hours to prove that the red mud on the doctor's shoe was the clay that would bury them both. I watched the car disappear down the street. Then I turned and locked the deadbolt. My house was silent, but the silence felt different now. It was not peaceful. It was heavy like the air before a thunderstorm. I walked over to the coat rack by the door, where my wet trench coat was still dripping onto the mat. I stared at it. That coat was the last thing that had touched my son. Last night when I left the dinner, I had hugged Leo. It was a brief, awkward hug because his wheelchair was in the way, and Tanya was watching, but I had pressed his head against my shoulder for just a second. I reached out and brushed my hand against the dark wool fabric. And there it was. Caught in the rough weave of the collar were 3 long strands of hair. Leo's hair. It used to be thick and dark brown just like mine was at his age. Now these strands looked brittle and thin, almost gray. I carefully picked them off with my trembling fingers. They were so light they almost floated away in the drafty hallway. I placed them into a small Ziploc bag I used for my heart medication. This was it. This was the only piece of Leo I had left that Tanya and Dr. Reeves could not touch. I did not have much time. If Reeves had cleaned out the storage unit last night, he would be moving fast to cover any other tracks. I grabbed my keys and headed out the back door. I did not take my car. They knew my license plate. Instead, I walked 3 blocks in the biting wind to the bus stop. I sat on the cold metal bench, pulling my hat down low over my eyes, watching every car that passed. I felt like a fugitive in my own city. The bus took me downtown to a nondescript brick building near the university. It was an old private pathology lab run by Frank Miller. Frank was a man who owed me his career. 20 years ago, he had been accused of falsifying evidence in a high-profile insurance case. I was the investigator who proved his innocence. He had told me then, "Henry, if you ever need anything at all, you just ask." I prayed he still meant it. I walked into the lab. The smell of formaldehyde and rubbing alcohol hit me instantly, bringing back memories of 100 crime scenes. Frank was hunched over a microscope, his white hair wild and unkempt. He looked up when the door chimed and his eyes widened behind his thick glasses. "Henry Sullivan," he said, his voice raspy from years of chain smoking. "I have not seen you since my retirement party. You look like hell, my friend." "I do not have time for pleasantries, Frank," I said, placing the Ziploc bag on the counter. "I need you to run a full toxicology screen on this hair sample. And I need you to do it now. Off the books." Frank looked at the bag, then at my face. He saw the desperation in my eyes. He did not ask questions. He just nodded and took the bag. "Give me an hour," he said, turning back to his equipment. I sat in the waiting area on a plastic chair that dug into my back. An hour. An hour is an eternity when your son's life is ticking away. I pulled out my old flip phone to check the time. That is when it vibrated. A new message. The number was blocked. I opened it. My blood ran cold. "Old man, stop digging or you will lose the grandson too." I stared at the screen, the letters blurring before my eyes. Noah. They were watching me. They knew I was not just resting at home. They knew I was still fighting. How did they know? I looked around the empty waiting room, paranoia creeping up my spine like a spider. Was there a camera? Was Frank compromised? No. Frank was loyal. It had to be my phone. They were tracking my phone. I stood up and walked to the trash can in the corner. I looked at the phone one last time at the picture of Leo and Noah I used as a wallpaper. Then I dropped it into the bin. I could not risk them finding me here. I could not risk them finding Frank. I paced the small room, my mind racing. If they hurt Noah, I would kill them. I would forget the law, I would forget justice, and I would tear them apart with my bare hands. The thought scared me. I had always been a man of rules. But the rules were not working anymore. The rules were being used to kill my son. The door to the lab opened and Frank stepped out. He was holding a sheet of paper and his face was pale, paler than usual. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Henry," he said quietly. "Who does this hair belong to?" "My son," I whispered. "Leo." Frank let out a long, slow breath. He walked over and handed me the paper. "I ran a standard drug screen first," Frank said. "Negative for meth. Negative for opioids. Negative for everything Dr. Reeves claimed. But then I looked at the structure of the hair shaft. It is degraded, Henry. Severely degraded. So I ran a heavy metal panel." He pointed to a red line on the chart. "Thallium," Frank said. "The levels are off the charts. It is a slow-acting poison, Henry. Tasteless, odorless, and water-soluble. The KGB used to use it. It causes hair loss, nerve damage, tremors, muscle wasting, and eventually organ failure and death. It mimics a dozen other diseases, which makes it the perfect murder weapon for someone who wants to play doctor." I looked at the number. The concentration was lethal. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Based on the growth segments," Frank said, tapping the paper. "He has been ingesting this for at least 3 months. But there is a spike here in the last week. Henry, they are upping the dose. If he keeps taking whatever they are giving him, he will not last another week. His kidneys will shut down first, then his heart." I crumbled the paper in my fist. Thallium. Rat poison. They were feeding my son rat poison and telling the world he was a drug addict. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. "Can you prove it?" I asked. "Can this stand up in court?" Frank nodded grimly. "This is definitive, Henry. But you need to find the source. You need to find how they are administering it. If you can find the vessel, I can match the chemical signature." I put the paper in my pocket. I knew the vessel. I remembered the protein shakes Tanya made for him every morning. The ones she insisted were for his strength. The ones she blended herself in the kitchen while humming opera music. "Thank you, Frank," I said, turning to the door. "Henry," Frank called out. "Be careful. People who use thallium, they are patient and they are cold. They do not make mistakes." I opened the door and stepped back out into the gray afternoon. I did not feel cold anymore. I felt a fire burning in my chest. I had the proof. Now I just needed to survive long enough to use it. They threatened my grandson. They poisoned my son. They thought they were dealing with a helpless old man. I pulled my collar up and merged into the crowd of students on the sidewalk. I was not going home. I was going back to the lion's den. I was going back to Leo's house. I had to find that poison, and God help anyone who stood in my way. I knew exactly where to go, the kitchen. If Tanya was poisoning Leo, she was doing it there. She was the one who prepared all his meals, who blended those nutrient shakes he was forced to drink 3 times a day. I stood on the sidewalk a block away from the house, watching the driveway. Tanya's car was gone. Dr. Reeves' car was gone. The house was dark except for the faint blue glow of the television in the living room, where Leo was likely slumped in his wheelchair, staring at nothing. Noah would be at school until 4. This was my window. I walked up the side of the house, keeping to the shadows of the tall hedges I had planted myself 10 years ago. I felt like a criminal in the home I had paid for. I still had my spare key, the one Tanya had forgotten to ask for back when she started changing the locks on the main doors. It was for the side entrance, the laundry room door. I slipped it into the lock, praying she had not changed this one too. It turned. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding and stepped inside. The house smelled of lavender and something chemical. Cleaning products maybe, or air freshener, trying to cover up the scent of sickness. I moved quietly through the laundry room and into the kitchen. It was pristine. Marble countertops, gleaming stainless steel appliances shining under the recessed lighting. It looked like a showroom, not a home. I went straight to the pantry. Rows of organic protein powders, vitamin supplements, and herbal teas lined the shelves. I started opening them one by one. I checked the seals. I checked the powder. Everything looked normal. I felt a surge of frustration. Where was she hiding it? Thallium is tasteless, odorless. She could mix it into anything. I moved to the spice rack. Nothing. I checked the refrigerator. Nothing but almond milk and kale. Then I saw it. On the top shelf of the pantry, pushed all the way to the back, behind a large tub of protein powder, was a small, unmarked glass jar. It was filled with a fine white crystalline powder. It looked like sugar or salt. I reached for it. Just as my fingers touched the cool glass, I heard the front door open. Laughter. A woman's laughter. Tanya's laughter. And then a man's voice, deep and smooth. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought they would hear it. They were not supposed to be here. It was 2 in the afternoon. Tanya should be at her charity luncheon. Dr. Reeves should be at his clinic. I cannot wait any longer, Tanya said, her voice husky and breathless. Right here, the man asked. Right here. Leo is out cold. I gave him a double dose of the sedative. He won't wake up until tomorrow. Footsteps. Clicking of heels on the hardwood floor coming toward the kitchen. I panicked. There was no way out. The back door was too far. The only hiding place was the narrow utility closet next to the refrigerator. I slipped inside and pulled the door shut just as they walked into the room. Through the slats of the closet door, I could see them. Tanya was pressed up against the kitchen island, and Dr. Reeves was kissing her neck. He had his hands on her waist, and she was running her fingers through his hair. I felt a wave of nausea. My son was upstairs, dying in a drug-induced coma, and his wife was down here cheating on him with the man who was supposed to be saving his life. Reeves pulled away slightly. Are you sure he is out? He asked, looking up at the ceiling. Tanya laughed again, a cruel sound. I told you, he is a vegetable. By Friday, he will be legally incompetent. And by next week, well, nature will take its course. I held my breath, pressing my hand over my mouth to stop myself from screaming. Did you get the papers from the old man? Reeves asked, unbuttoning his shirt. Tanya smirked. Oh, please. Henry is a senile fool. He actually believed your story about the drugs. He was so relieved to think Leo is just an addict. He threw the evidence away. We are in the clear. Reeves chuckled. Good. Because once the judge signs that conservatorship order on Friday, we pull the plug. Literally. We transfer him to the hospice wing, stop the dialysis, and let the kidney failure finish him off. It will look like a tragic natural death. And then the 50 million is yours. Or should I say ours? They kissed again, passionate and greedy. I squeezed my eyes shut, tears of rage burning my cheeks. They had planned it all. The poisoning was just stage 1. The legal theft was stage 2. And the murder was the finale. And they were celebrating it right here in my son's kitchen. We should go upstairs, Tanya whispered. The bed is more comfortable. No, Reeves said. Right here, on the counter. It feels more victorious. I had to listen. I had to listen to the sounds of their betrayal, the sounds of them defiling my son's home while I cowered in a closet clutching a jar of white powder that I prayed was the evidence that would send them to prison. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, they stopped. They fixed their clothes, laughing softly. I have to get back to the clinic, Reeves said. I have a meeting with the ethics board. Irony is dead, is it not? Tanya giggled. Call me later. I need to go give Leo his afternoon shake, just to keep the levels up. She walked over to the pantry. My heart stopped. I was standing right next to the pantry. If she looked down, if she saw the jar, I had moved. I heard the clink of glass. She was making the shake. I heard the whir of the blender. Here is to your health, darling, she whispered to the empty air. Then silence. The front door opened and closed. I waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. I pushed the closet door open and stumbled out. My legs were shaking so bad I could barely stand. I grabbed the small jar from the back of the pantry. I did not care about fingerprints anymore. I shoved it into my pocket. I walked into the living room. Leo was there in his wheelchair facing the window. His head was lolling to the side, his mouth slightly open. Drool was dripping onto his shirt. Leo, I whispered. He did not move. His skin was cold. I am sorry, I choked out. I am so sorry I let this happen. But I promise you, son. I promise you on your mother's grave. Friday is not going to be their victory day. It is going to be their judgment day. I kissed his forehead and ran. I ran out the back door into the cold afternoon air, clutching the jar of poison like it was a holy relic. I had the weapon. I had the motive. And now I knew their deadline. Friday. I had 48 hours to stop a murder that was already in progress. And I was going to need help. Serious help. I shoved the glass jar deep into my coat pocket. My hand was shaking so badly I could feel the cold glass vibrating against my hip. I had what I needed. Now I just had to get out of this house alive. The front door was blocked by their car. The back door was too far. The only way out was the side entrance through the laundry room, but that meant passing the kitchen again. I could still hear the faint hum of the refrigerator. The silence in the house was deafening. I took a step. A floorboard creaked. It was a loud, sharp sound that echoed like a gunshot in the quiet hallway. I froze. Who is there? Tanya's voice cut through the air. It was not fearful. It was sharp, commanding. I did not answer. I backed away slowly, hoping to slip into the shadows of the dining room. But then I heard footsteps. Fast, confident footsteps. I turned to run, but my foot caught the edge of a small decorative table in the hallway. A vase, a heavy crystal thing Tanya loved, wobbled and fell. I lunged to catch it, but my old reflexes were too slow. It shattered on the hardwood floor with a crash that sounded like an explosion. Well, well, well. I looked up. Tanya was standing at the end of the hallway. She was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, a smug smile playing on her lips. She did not look surprised. She looked like she had been expecting me. I wondered when you would show up, Henry, she said. You always were predictable. The hero complex never really goes away, does it? I stood up straight, brushing the glass shards from my coat. I stared her down, channeling every ounce of authority I had left. It is over, Tanya. I know about the thallium. I have the sample. I heard you and Reeves. You are going to prison for a very long time. Tanya laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Prison. You think anyone is going to believe you? You are a 70-year-old man with a history of heart problems and lately signs of dementia. Or at least that is what your medical records will say after Dr. Reeves updates them tonight. She took a step closer, her eyes gleaming with malice. You broke into my house, Henry. You terrified me. I was just a defenseless woman alone in her home when her estranged father-in-law broke in. What are you talking about? I demanded, backing away. She pulled her phone from her pocket. The screen was already glowing. I called the police 5 minutes ago, Henry, the moment the silent alarm on the back door tripped. Did you really think I would not secure the perimeter knowing you were out there? I knew you would come back. You are like a dog with a bone. Sirens. I heard them in the distance, getting louder, getting closer. You are sick, I spat at her. You are killing your husband for money. I am putting him out of his misery, Tanya said, her voice suddenly cold and flat. And I am taking what I deserve. I put up with his obsession with work for 10 years. I smiled at his boring parties. I played the dutiful wife. Now it is my turn to be happy. And you? You are just a sad old man who lost his mind. The sirens were deafening now. Blue and red lights flashed through the front windows, painting the walls in chaotic bursts of color. Tires screeched in the driveway. Car doors slammed. Police. Open up. Tanya instantly changed. Her posture slumped. She messed up her hair with her hands. She ripped the top button of her blouse. She squeezed her eyes shut and forced out a sob that sounded terrifyingly real. Help me! Please help me! He is crazy. The front door burst open. 2 uniformed officers rushed in, guns drawn. Drop it! Drop the weapon! I held up my empty hands. I am not armed. I am his father. She is lying. She is poisoning him. Get on the ground, now. One of the officers, a young man with a buzz cut, grabbed my arm and twisted it behind my back. Pain shot through my shoulder. I grunted, my knees hitting the floor hard. Please, Tanya wailed, pointing a trembling finger at me. He broke in. He has been stalking me. He cornered me in the kitchen. He tried to touch me. The accusation hung in the air like a cloud of poison gas. I gasped. That is a lie. That is a filthy lie. Check her pockets. Check the kitchen. The poison is in the pantry. Shut up, old man, the officer barked, pressing my face into the floor. He has been talking about conspiracies for weeks, Tanya sobbed, burying her face in the other officer's shoulder. He thinks the government is after him. He thinks I am a spy. I told him to stay away, but he broke in. Look at the vase. He threw it at me. I struggled against the cuffs, feeling the metal bite into my wrists. Officer, listen to me. My son is upstairs in a coma. She and her lover, Dr. Reeves, are killing him with thallium. I have evidence in my pocket. There is a jar. The officer patted me down. He pulled the jar of white powder from my coat. What is this? He asked, holding it up. That is it, I yelled. That is the poison. Test it. Please just test it. Tanya gasped. Oh my God. He brought drugs. He is trying to frame me. He told me he would plant drugs in the house if I did not give him money. The officer shook his head, looking at me with disgust. Breaking and entering. Assault. Possession of a controlled substance. You have had a busy day, Grandpa. They hauled me up. My legs felt like lead. I looked at Tanya. She was watching me from behind her hands, but her eyes were dry and she winked. A tiny, almost imperceptible wink. You will not get away with this, I screamed as they dragged me out the door. No one knows. You cannot silence everyone. Tanya shouted after me, her voice breaking with fake sorrow. I am so sorry, Henry. We will get you help. I promise. The cool night air hit my face, but it did not calm me. I was shoved into the back of the cruiser. The hard plastic seat was cold. I saw my neighbors standing on their porches watching in silence. I saw the judgment in their eyes. There goes Henry, losing his mind, attacking his family. I leaned my forehead against the metal grate separating me from the officers. I felt a tear slide down my nose. Not of fear, but of pure frustration. They took my phone. They took the jar. They took my freedom. But they did not check my other pocket, the small inside pocket of my jacket. The Ziploc bag with Leo's hair was still there, and Frank already had the first sample. I watched Leo's house disappear as the police car turned the corner. I was going to jail. But I was not defeated. Tanya had made one miscalculation. She thought humiliating me would stop me. She thought locking me up would break me. She did not know that she had just given me the perfect alibi to be exactly where I needed to be, in the system, where I could make one phone call. And I knew exactly who to call. It was not a lawyer. It was not a friend. It was the one person who hated Tanya almost as much as I did. I closed my eyes and listened to the sirens wail. Let them think I am crazy. Let them think I am dangerous. Because when I get out of here, I will be. The sound of the heavy steel door sliding shut was the loneliest sound I had ever heard. It echoed through the concrete block of the holding cell, vibrating in my bones and sealing me in a box of gray despair. I sat down on the thin metal bench bolted to the wall, and the cold seeped through my trousers, instantly chilling me to the core. The air smelled of stale sweat, industrial bleach, and the hopelessness of 1,000 men who had sat here before me. But none of them had a son dying in a multi-million-dollar mansion 10 miles away. None of them had a 12-year-old grandson who was currently sleeping under the same roof as a murderer. I put my head in my hands, and for the first time in 40 years, I felt truly powerless. I was Henry Sullivan. I was the man who could spot a liar from across the room. I was the man who had unraveled million-dollar fraud schemes with nothing but a notepad and a hunch. And now I was just inmate number 492, a senile old man arrested for assaulting his grieving daughter-in-law. Hours bled into one another. I had no watch. They had taken my belt, my shoelaces, and my dignity. The only way I could mark the time was by the changing of the guards and the tray of cold, unidentifiable food they slid through the slot. I did not eat. I could not eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Leo. I saw his head lolling to the side. I saw the drool on his chin. I saw the trust in his eyes the last time he looked at me before the poison took his mind. And I saw Tanya winking at me as the police shoved me into the car. That wink haunted me. It was the victory flag of a psychopath. Sometime in the middle of the night, or maybe it was early morning, a woman in a white coat came to see me. She was young, with tired eyes and a clipboard. She introduced herself as the court-appointed psychiatrist. She spoke to me slowly, enunciating every word as if I were a child or a simpleton. "Mr. Sullivan, do you know where you are? Do you know why you were brought here?" I tried to explain. I sat up straight and used my most professional voice. I told her about the thallium. I told her about the fake medical records. I told her about the affair between Tanya and Dr. Reeves. I laid out the facts clearly and logically, just as I would to a jury. She listened, nodding politely, scribbling notes. But when I finished, she did not look outraged. She looked pitying. She tapped her pen on the paper and asked one question that shattered my defense. "Mr. Sullivan, have you been forgetting things lately? Have you been feeling paranoid that people are watching you?" I realized then that she had already read Tanya's statement. She had already read Dr. Reeves' falsified report claiming I had dementia. My logic sounded like conspiracy theories to her. My passion sounded like mania. When she left, she did not promise to call the district attorney. She just told the guard to keep me on suicide watch. I lay back on the hard bunk and stared at the ceiling. The despair was a physical weight pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Tomorrow was Friday. Friday was the hearing. Friday was the day Tanya would legally become Leo's executioner. Once she had that conservatorship, she could legally stop his treatment. She could pull the plug. And I would be sitting in this cell rotting away while they buried my son and spent his fortune. And Noah, my God, Noah. What would happen to him? He was the only witness left. If he tried to speak up, would he be the next one to get a special protein shake? The thought made me sick. I curled into a ball, facing the concrete wall, fighting back the bile rising in my throat. I had failed them. I had been outsmarted by a woman who treated murder like a business transaction. "You are being too loud, old man." The voice came from the top bunk. I had forgotten I had a cellmate. Most of the time in holding they keep you moving, but the jail was overcrowded tonight. The man above me had been a silent lump under a blanket when I arrived. I turned my head. A pair of legs swung down, followed by a large torso. He jumped down, landing silently on the concrete floor despite his size. He was older, maybe my age, but rougher. His face was a map of scars and deep lines etched by a hard life. He had a gray beard and tattoos that faded into his wrinkled skin. He looked like a man who had stopped caring about the world a long time ago. "I am sorry," I whispered. "I did not mean to disturb you." He walked over to the bars and leaned against them, looking out into the hallway. He did not look at me. He just stared at the empty corridor. "You kept muttering in your sleep," he said, his voice like gravel grinding together. "Talking about poison. Talking about a boy named Leo. You sound like a man who is running out of time." I sat up, rubbing my face. "I am," I said. "My son is dying, and I am stuck in here while his wife kills him." The man turned his head slowly and looked at me. His eyes were dark and sharp, intelligent in a dangerous way. He studied my face for a long time. It was an uncomfortable scrutiny, like being under a microscope. Then his expression changed. The hardness around his eyes softened just a fraction. "Henry," he said. It was not a question. I froze. "Do I know you?" The man chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "You do not remember me. But I remember you. 20 years ago. The warehouse fire on 4th Street. I searched my memory. The 4th Street fire. It was a massive arson case. The owner was accused of torching his own textile factory for the payout. The police were ready to charge him. The insurance company wanted to deny the claim. But I had investigated. I had spent 3 days crawling through the charred wreckage, inhaling ash and soot. I found the faulty wiring, I said, the memory coming back. It was not arson. It was a short circuit in the old breaker box. The rats had chewed through the insulation. The man nodded. "That is right. Everyone said I did it. Everyone said I was a crook who needed cash. But you stood up in that deposition and told them the truth. You saved me from 10 years in prison. You saved my reputation. My name is Miller. Jack Miller." I looked at him. I remembered the case, but the man in front of me looked nothing like the factory owner I remembered. Time and tragedy had carved him into someone else. "I lost the business anyway." A few years later, Miller said, shrugging. "Bad economy. Bad luck. Ended up making some poor choices. That is why I am here. But I never forgot that you did not look at me like a criminal. You looked at the evidence." He stepped away from the bars and moved to the back of the cell where the shadows were deepest. He crouched down and fiddled with the hem of his pants. I watched him confused. "Why are you here?" Henry Miller asked without looking up. I told him. I told him everything. I told him about the storage unit, the fake doctors, the police arresting me. I told him that I needed to make one phone call to a man named Victor Drax, the only person powerful enough and motivated enough to get me out of here before Friday. But they took my phone. Miller stood up. He walked over to me and held out his hand. Sitting in his palm was a tiny black object. It was a cell phone smaller than a credit card. A prison phone. A piece of contraband that could add years to his sentence if he was caught. It is not a smartphone, Miller said quietly. You cannot browse the internet. But you can make a call. The battery is low, so make it count. I stared at the phone. It looked like a lifeline thrown into the middle of a drowning ocean. Why, I asked. You could get in trouble. Miller pressed the phone into my hand and closed my fingers around it. His grip was strong and rough. Because you were the only one who believed me when I was innocent, he said. And now I believe you. You have that same look in your eyes that you had back then. The look of a man who knows the truth but just needs a chance to prove it. Call your guy Henry. Save your boy. I looked at the tiny device in my hand. My heart started to hammer against my ribs again, but this time it was not from fear. It was from hope. I looked up at Miller. Thank you, I whispered. Do not thank me, he said, climbing back onto his bunk and pulling the blanket up. Just get out of here. And when you get that woman, give her hell for me. I moved to the corner of the cell furthest from the guard station. I shielded the phone with my body and pressed the power button. The screen lit up with a faint blue glow. I prayed that Victor Drax was awake. I prayed that he still hated Tanya enough to help me. And I prayed that this tiny piece of plastic would be the key to unlocking the cage they had built around my family. I dialed the number from memory and held the phone to my ear, waiting for the ring. I huddled in the corner of the cell, shielding the tiny screen with my body like it was a candle in a hurricane. My fingers felt too large for the miniature keypad. I did not need to look up the number. I had spent the last 5 years memorizing every detail of the man who had tried to drive my son out of business. Victor Drax, the CEO of Nexus Corp, a man who had publicly sworn to crush Leo, a man with the morals of a shark and the resources of a small country. He was my last hope, not because he was a good man, but because he was a smart one. And smart men know when to cut their losses. I pressed the call button. The line hissed, then rang. 1 ring. 2 rings. It was 3 a.m. A normal man would be asleep. Victor Drax was not a normal man. Yeah. The voice on the other end was groggy but sharp. Who is this? This is a private line. Victor. I whispered, my voice raspy from dehydration and disuse. It is Henry Sullivan. There was a pause, a long, heavy silence, then a short, cruel laugh. Henry Sullivan, the father of the year. I heard you got arrested for assaulting your daughter-in-law. It is all over the news, Henry. What are you doing calling me? Do you want a job cleaning my floors now that your family has disowned you? I did not take the bait. I did not have time for his ego. I gripped the phone tighter, feeling the plastic dig into my palm. I am not calling for a job, Victor. I am calling to make a deal. And if you hang up now, you are going to spend the rest of your life in a federal prison cell, just like the one I am sitting in. The laughter stopped. What are you talking about, old man? You are delusional. That is what the police report said. Dementia. I took a deep breath. This was it. The bluff of a lifetime. I had to sell it. I had to believe it myself. I went to the storage unit Victor, Unit 247 on Pike Street. Tanya told the police she cleaned it out. She told them it was a drug lab. But she missed something. She missed the ledger tucked behind the ventilation duct. And do you know what I found in that ledger? I paused, letting the silence stretch, letting his own guilt fill in the blanks. I found your name, Victor. I found the transaction records. $50,000 for a shipment of industrial-grade thallium imported from Russia, delivered to a shell company registered in your name. It was a lie. A complete fabrication. I had found no ledger. I had no proof Victor was involved. But I knew Victor Drax. He was a man who cut corners. He was a man who dealt in gray markets. And I knew that even if he had not sold the poison to Tanya, He had probably sold her something else. Or maybe he just had enough dirty laundry that the mere threat of an FBI investigation terrified him. "You are lying," Victor hissed, but his voice had lost its arrogance. It was tight now, anxious. I asked, keeping my voice calm and deadly steady. "I have the papers, Henry. Or at least my partner on the outside does. If I am not released within the next 2 hours, those papers go straight to the district attorney and to the press. Think about it, Victor. The headlines. Tech CEO arrested for conspiring to murder rival. Your stock will crash before the market opens. Your board will fire you. You will be finished." There was silence on the line. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the gears turning in his head, calculating the risk. He did not know what I had. He could not take the chance. In his world, perception was reality, and I was threatening to shatter his reality. "What do you want?" he asked finally. His voice was low defeat, heavy in every syllable. "I want out," I said. "I want your lawyer. Not the corporate one. The cleaner. The one you use when you get a DUI or when a girl threatens to talk. Send him to the 4th precinct. Tell him to get me out on a technicality. Tell him to bail me out. I do not care how he does it. Just get me out of this cage." "And the papers?" Victor asked. "You get me out, and the papers stay buried. I lied." "Fine," he snapped. "Give me 20 minutes. But if you ever come near me, Henry, I will kill you myself." He hung up. The line went dead. I lowered the phone, my hand trembling uncontrollably now that the adrenaline was fading. I slumped against the cold concrete wall. I had done it. I had looked the devil in the eye and forced him to blink. Jack Miller was watching me from his bunk. He did not say a word. He just gave me a slow nod of respect. He knew what a desperate man looked like, and he knew I had just gambled everything on a pair of deuces. I handed the phone back to him. "Thank you," I whispered. "Keep it," Miller said, lying back down. "You might need it again." I waited. The minutes dragged by like hours. I paced the small cell, 3 steps forward, 3 steps back. Had Victor called his lawyer? Or had he called the police to report my phone? Was I about to be released? Or was I about to be thrown into solitary confinement? My mind raced with scenarios, each worse than the last. Then I heard it. The sound of expensive leather shoes clicking on the concrete floor. It was a different sound than the heavy boots of the guards. It was the sound of authority. The heavy steel door slid open with a screech. A guard stood there, looking annoyed and slightly confused. Behind him stood a man in a midnight blue suit that looked like it was tailored in London. He was holding a briefcase, and he looked at the jail cell with a mixture of boredom and disdain. "Henry Sullivan," the man in the suit said. His voice was smooth like oiled glass. "I am Arthur Sterling. Mr. Drax sent me. Grab your things. We are leaving." I stood up, my knees popping. The guard unlocked the inner gate. "Hold on," the guard grumbled. "The paperwork says no bail. Psychiatric hold." Arthur Sterling did not even look at the guard. He pulled a document from his briefcase and held it up. It was stamped with a judge's seal. "Habeas corpus." Mr. Sterling said casually, "The arrest was procedurally flawed. Mr. Sullivan was denied his right to counsel upon arrest, and the warrant for the search of his person was signed by a judge who has been recused from criminal cases for a week due to illness. It is a clerical nightmare, Sergeant. Unless you want a civil rights lawsuit filed against this precinct by morning, I suggest you process his release immediately." The guard blinked, looking at the paper, then at the lawyer. He knew he was outmatched. He knew this was above his pay grade. He grunted and stepped aside. "Let is go, Sullivan." I walked out of the cell. I did not look back at the guard. I looked at Jack Miller. He raised a hand in a silent farewell. I nodded, promising myself I would put money in his commissary account the moment this was over. I followed Sterling down the long hallway, through the booking area, where the sleepy officers stared at us, and out into the cool night air. The rain had stopped. The city was quiet. Sterling walked me to a black sedan waiting at the curb. He opened the back door. "Mr. Drax expects you to keep your end of the bargain," he said coldly. "Tell Victor I am a man of my word," I said. Which was true. I would keep the bargain. I would not release the fake papers. But I was not done with Victor Drax either. I did not get in the car. "Where are you going?" Sterling asked, frowning. "I have a son to save," I said, "and I do not need a ride from the man who helped poison him." I turned and walked away into the darkness. I had my freedom. I had the phone. And now I had less than 24 hours until Friday morning. The bluff had worked. But the real war was just starting. I needed to get to Frank. I needed the results of the hair test. And then I needed to crash a wedding between a murderer and a helpless victim. I walked fast, my old legs finding a new strength. The city felt different now. It was not a cage anymore. It was a hunting ground. And for the first time in days, I was not the prey. I was the hunter. Tanya thought she had won. She thought I was locked away crying in a cell. She was sleeping soundly in my son's house, dreaming of her inheritance. She had no idea that I was coming for her. And this time I was not bringing a warning. I was bringing a reckoning. The city was sleeping, but I was wide awake, my veins pumping with a mixture of caffeine and cold fury. I did not go home. Home was the first place they would look. Instead, I walked to an all-night diner, ordered a black coffee, and used the payphone in the back to call a taxi. I had the prison phone in my pocket, but I was saving the battery for the final blow. The taxi dropped me off a block away from Frank's lab. It was 4 a.m. The windows were dark, but I knew Frank. He practically lived there. I knocked on the back door 3 times, paused, then twice more. The old code. A moment later, the door cracked open, and Frank's tired face peered out. He did not ask questions. He just pulled me inside and handed me a sealed envelope. "It is all there, Henry," he said, his voice gravelly with sleep. "The spectral analysis confirms it. The thallium levels in the hair sample are consistent with chronic poisoning over a period of 3 months, and I found traces of the binding agent used in commercial rat poison. This is not accidental ingestion. This is homicide in slow motion." I took the envelope, feeling its weight. It was lighter than air, but it held the power to destroy lives. "Thank you, Frank," I said, gripping his shoulder. "Go back to sleep. You never saw me." He nodded and locked the door behind me. I had the science. Now I needed the voice. I spent the next 3 hours sitting in a park across from Noah's private school, watching the sun come up over the wet pavement. I was cold hungry, and I looked like a vagrant in my rumpled clothes, but my mind was sharp. At 7:30, the first buses started arriving. I saw the familiar silver SUV pull up to the curb. It was Tanya's car, but Tanya was not driving. It was a hired driver. She was too busy preparing for her victory in court to drive her son to school. I watched Noah climb out. He looked small, his backpack weighing him down, his head low. He walked toward the gate, not looking at anyone. I waited until the driver pulled away, then I moved. I walked up to the fence near the bike racks where I knew Noah usually waited for the bell. "Noah," I whispered. He spun around, his eyes wide. "Grandpa." He ran to the fence, reaching his small fingers through the chain links. "I thought you were in jail. Mom said you were crazy. She said you tried to hurt her." "She lied, Noah," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Listen to me. Did you do what I asked?" Noah looked around nervously, then reached into his pocket. He pulled out a sleek silver pen. It looked like an expensive fountain pen, but I knew it was a high-fidelity voice recorder disguised as a writing instrument. I had given it to him for his birthday last year, telling him it was for his spy games. I never thought the game would become real. I put it in Dad's pocket yesterday morning. Noah whispered, passing it through the fence. Just like you said in the note. Mom was yelling at him last night. I turned it on before I went to bed, and I retrieved it this morning before she woke up. Grandpa, is Dad going to be okay? I took the pen, clutching it tight. He is going to be fine, Noah. Because you just saved his life. Go to class. Act normal. I will see you soon. He nodded, tears welling in his eyes, then turned and ran back toward the school building. I watched him go, a surge of pride swelling in my chest. He was braver than most men I knew. I walked back to the taxi I had asked to wait. Drive, I said. Just drive. I sat in the back seat, my hands trembling as I unscrewed the top of the pen and plugged the small USB drive into the adapter I had bought at an electronics store on the way. I put my earbuds in and pressed play. The first few minutes were just rustling sounds, fabric moving against fabric. Then I heard it. The sound of a door opening. Leo, honey, are you awake? It was Tanya. Her voice was not the sweet, caring tone she used in public. It was flat, impatient. Silence. Then a groan. A weak, pained sound from my son. Drink this, Tanya said. Come on. Dr. Reeves said we need to get your levels up before the hearing. I do not want it, Leo mumbled. It tastes bitter. Don't be a baby, Leo. It is just the new vitamins. Drink it. I heard the sound of liquid being swallowed, then coughing. Good boy, Tanya said. You know, I was looking at travel brochures today. The Maldives looks nice this time of year. I think I will go there after the funeral. Maybe take Reeves with me. He has been so helpful, haven't he? What? What funeral? Leo asked, his voice slurring. Yours, darling, Tanya said casually, as if discussing the weather. Oh, do not look so shocked. You have been checking out for months. Your liver is shot. Your kidneys are failing. The doctor says it is a tragedy. A brilliant mind lost to addiction. It is a good story, Leo. People love a tragedy. Addiction, Leo whispered. I never took drugs. Who is going to believe you? Tanya laughed softly. You cannot even hold a spoon. And your father. Poor Henry. He tried to help you, but he is old and confused. He is sitting in a cell right now. Nobody is coming for you, Leo. Just close your eyes. It will all be over soon. The recording ended with the sound of a door clicking shut. I pulled the earbuds out. My hands were not shaking anymore. They were clenched into fists so tight my fingernails dug into my palms. I looked out the window. The city was waking up, people going to work oblivious to the evil that walked among them. But I knew. And now I had the proof. I checked the time. 8:45. The hearing was at 9:30. Driver, I said, my voice cold and hard as steel. Take me to the courthouse. And do not stop for red lights. We were going to be late, but I did not care. I had the hair. I had the tape. And I had the rage of a father who had just heard his son being murdered by the woman he promised to love and cherish. Tanya thought she was walking into a coronation. She was walking into an execution. And I was the executioner. The rain had started again, not a drizzle, but a downpour that seemed determined to wash the city into the sea. I slammed the door of the taxi shut and handed the driver a crumpled $20 bill, the last of my cash. Keep the change. I barked, my mind already racing ahead to the courthouse steps. We were 3 blocks away. Traffic was gridlocked, a sea of red taillights, stretching as far as the eye could see. There was an accident up ahead, probably caused by the storm. I looked at the dashboard clock. 9:15. The hearing started in 15 minutes. We cannot wait here, I told the driver, who was already drumming his fingers impatiently on the steering wheel. I turned to the back seat where Noah was huddled, his small face pale but determined. "We have to run, Noah. Are you ready?" He nodded without hesitation, gripping the straps of his backpack. "Yes, Grandpa." We bailed out of the cab into the deluge. The cold water hit us instantly, soaking through my thin jacket and Noah's school uniform. We hit the sidewalk running. I was 70 years old, and my knees screamed in protest with every step, but adrenaline is a powerful drug. I grabbed Noah's hand, pulling him along, dodging pedestrians who were huddled under umbrellas, cursing the weather. We ran past office buildings, past coffee shops filled with people starting their mundane days, oblivious to the life and death struggle happening right outside their windows. My breath came in ragged gasps, burning my lungs. My heart felt like it was going to explode, but I forced myself to keep moving. I could see the courthouse in the distance, its gray stone columns looming like the gates of judgment. Suddenly, a black sedan swerved across the intersection, splashing a wave of dirty puddle water over us. I stumbled, my foot catching on a crack in the pavement. I went down hard, my palms scraping against the rough concrete. Grandpa Noah cried, stopping instantly to help me up. I waved him off, scrambling to my feet. "I am fine. Keep going." But as I stood up, I saw it. The black sedan had not kept going. It had pulled over a few yards ahead. Two men in dark suits got out. They were big, broad-shouldered, and they were not looking at the traffic. They were looking at us. Tanya's security. Or maybe Reeves' hired muscle. It did not matter. They were here to stop us. "Run, Noah!" I shouted, shoving him toward the alleyway between two buildings. "Go around the back. Do not stop until you get to the judge." Noah hesitated, his eyes wide with fear. "But Grandpa—" "Go!" I roared, finding a voice I had not used in 20 years. Noah turned and sprinted, his small legs pumping furiously. The two men started to run after him. "Oh, no you don't," I growled. I looked around. There was a delivery truck parked next to me, its driver unloading crates of soda. I grabbed a metal crate heavy with glass bottles, and with a grunt of effort I hurled it into the path of the pursuers. It crashed onto the sidewalk, glass shattering, soda exploding in a fizzy geyser. The men slipped, one of them going down hard on the slick pavement. I did not wait to see if they got up. I ran. I ran, not away from them, but toward the main street, hoping to draw their attention. "Hey, over here!" I yelled, waving my arms like a madman. It worked. The second man turned, his eyes locking onto me with cold malice. He abandoned the chase for the boy and came for the old man. I ducked into the crowd, weaving between startled pedestrians. I needed a miracle. I needed a ride. And then I saw it. A city bus pulling away from the curb. I lunged for the door, banging on the glass. The driver frowned but opened the door. I scrambled on, flashing my expired senior's pass. "Move to the back," the driver grumbled. I collapsed into a seat, my chest heaving. I looked out the window. The man in the suit was standing on the curb, glaring at the bus as it pulled into traffic. I had lost him. But I had also lost time. 9:25. The bus crawled through the congestion. I sat there, water dripping from my nose onto the floor, counting the seconds. Every stop felt like an eternity. Every red light was a personal insult. Finally, 3 blocks later, I saw the courthouse again. I pulled the cord and jumped off before the bus even came to a complete stop. I ran up the massive stone steps, my legs feeling like lead. I was alone now. I prayed Noah had made it. I prayed he was inside safe. I reached the top of the stairs, gasping for air. The massive oak doors were closed. I grabbed the handle. Locked. "Session is in progress," a deep voice boomed. I turned. A security guard stood there, arms crossed. He looked at me with open disgust. My hair was plastered to my skull, my clothes were torn and muddy from my fall, and I was shaking uncontrollably. "You cannot go in there looking like that," he said, blocking my path. "This is a court of law, not a homeless shelter. Move along, old-timer." "I am not homeless," I panted, reaching into my pocket for my ID. "My name is Henry Sullivan. I am the father of the man in that hearing." I have evidence. You have to let me in. The guard laughed. Sure you do. And I am the King of England. Look, buddy, the judge gave strict orders. Closed hearing. No interruptions. Especially not from disturbed individuals. We got a call about you. Said you might try to cause a scene. Tanya. She had thought of everything. She had called ahead. She had painted me as a lunatic before I even arrived. Please, I begged, desperation creeping into my voice. My son is dying. They are killing him. If I do not go in there, he will be dead by Monday. The guard stepped closer, his hand resting on his baton. I said, move along, or I will arrest you for trespassing. I looked at the closed doors. I could imagine what was happening inside. Tanya weeping fake tears, Dr. Reeves presenting his fake charts, the judge nodding sympathetically, ready to sign the death warrant. And here I was, inches away, stopped by a man in a uniform who thought he was doing his job. I did not have the strength to fight him. I did not have the time to argue. I looked around wildly. Was there another way in? A side door? A window? Then I heard a small voice. Hey, let him in. The guard turned. I turned. Standing just inside the glass doors of the lobby on the other side of the security checkpoint was Noah. He was soaked to the bone, shivering, but he was holding the hand of a woman in a sharp business suit. That is my grandfather. Noah said, his voice ringing clear and loud in the quiet lobby. And this is my lawyer. The woman stepped forward. She was tall, intimidating, and she looked at the guard with eyes that could cut glass. I am Patricia Vance, the woman said, holding up a badge. Child Advocacy Services. This boy says he has evidence relevant to the Sullivan hearing, and he says his grandfather is the custodian of that evidence. Open this door, now. The guard hesitated, looking from the formidable woman to the bedraggled old man. He knew when he was beaten. He sighed and swiped his keycard. The lock clicked. I pulled the heavy door open and stepped into the warmth of the lobby. I fell to my knees and hugged Noah, burying my face in his wet shoulder. You made it, I whispered. We have 5 minutes, Grandpa Noah said, pulling away. The judge is about to rule. I stood up, wiping the rain and tears from my face. I looked at the lawyer. Let us go get them, I said. We walked toward the courtroom doors, leaving a trail of muddy water on the polished marble floor. I was a mess. I was exhausted, but I had never felt more ready. The doors loomed ahead. Beyond them lay the lies. But I was bringing the truth, and the truth was about to kick the door down. The heavy oak doors of courtroom 4B swung open with a groan that seemed to echo like a thunderclap in the silent chamber. The air inside was warm and smelled of floor wax and old paper, a sharp contrast to the cold rain that was still dripping from my coat. I stepped across the threshold, and for a moment time seemed to freeze. It was a tableau of a tragedy nearing its final act. At the front of the room sat Judge Harrison, a man with a face like carved granite, reading a document that I knew was the conservatorship order. To his right stood Tanya. She was a vision of calculated sorrow, wearing a modest black dress, her head bowed effectively, playing the role of the devoted wife about to make the hardest decision of her life. Next to her, Dr. Reeves stood with his hands clasped behind his back, looking solemn and professional. They were seconds away from victory. The pen was hovering over the signature line. The sound of the door opening broke their concentration. Every head in the room turned. The court reporter paused, her fingers hovering over the keys. The bailiff stood up from his chair, his hand moving reflexively to his belt, and Tanya turned. When she saw me standing there, soaking wet, muddy, looking like a specter risen from the grave, her eyes went wide. For a split second, I saw the panic, the raw animal fear of a predator that realizes the trap has snapped shut on its own leg. But she was a professional. She masked it instantly, replacing the fear with a look of terrified victimhood. "Your Honor," she cried out, her voice trembling perfectly. "He is here. That is him. That is the man I told you about. He has escaped from custody. Please do not let him hurt me." Dr. Reeves stepped in front of her, acting the part of the protector. "Bailiff, remove this man," he commanded. "He is unstable and dangerous." Judge Harrison looked over his reading glasses, his brow furrowing in annoyance. "What is the meaning of this interruption?" "Bailiff, clear the court." The bailiff started to move toward me, his face set in a grim line. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I felt a small hand squeeze mine. Noah was standing right beside me, shivering, but standing tall. And next to him, Patricia Vance, the lawyer we had met in the lobby, stepped forward like a shield. "Your Honor," Patricia said, her voice cutting through the tension like a razor blade. "I am Patricia Vance from Child Advocacy Services. I am representing the interests of Noah Sullivan, the minor child of the subject of this hearing, and I am appearing on behalf of Henry Sullivan, who has entered this courtroom with emergency exculpatory evidence that directly impacts the life and safety of your ward, Leo Sullivan." The judge paused. The name Vance carried weight in this city. He looked from the sharp, impeccably dressed lawyer to the bedraggled old man and the wet child standing in a puddle on his expensive marble floor. "Miss Vance," the judge said, his voice wary, "this hearing is closed. Mr. Sullivan has been flagged as a security risk. If you have a motion, you can file it with the clerk." "We do not have time for clerks, Your Honor," Patricia shot back. "By the time a clerk stamps a piece of paper, Leo Sullivan will be dead. We are not asking for a continuance. We are asking for 2 minutes of this court's time to prevent a homicide." The word homicide hung in the air, sucking the oxygen out of the room. Tanya gasped, a theatrical hand flying to her chest. "This is outrageous," she sobbed. "My husband is dying of a degenerative condition, and his father is turning it into a circus. Please, Your Honor, just sign the papers so I can get back to my husband." I let go of Noah's hand. I walked down the center aisle. My wet shoes squeaked on the floor, a ridiculous sound that somehow made the moment more real. I did not run. I did not shout. I walked with the slow, deliberate pace of a man carrying the weight of the world. The bailiff looked at the judge, waiting for a signal. Judge Harrison looked at me. He looked into my eyes. And in that moment, he did not see the dementia patient Tanya had described. He saw a father. He saw the same desperation and resolve that he must have seen in 1,000 faces over his career. He held up a hand, signaling the bailiff to stand down. "Approach the bench," the judge said quietly. I walked past Tanya. I could smell her perfume, the same lavender scent that masked the smell of sickness in my son's house. She hissed at me under her breath, a sound so low only I could hear. "You are dead, old man." I ignored her. I stopped in front of the high wooden bench. I reached into my damp coat pocket. Reeves tense, expecting a weapon. I pulled out the envelope Frank had given me. It was slightly crumpled and damp at the edges. I placed it gently on the polished wood. Then I reached into my other pocket and pulled out the silver pen. I laid it next to the envelope. "What is this?" the judge asked, looking down at the items with distaste. "The truth, Your Honor." I said, my voice raspy but steady. "That envelope contains a toxicology report from an independent pathology lab generated 2 hours ago. It proves that my son Leo Sullivan is not an addict. It proves he does not have a degenerative brain disease. It proves that for the past 3 months, he has been systematically poisoned with thallium, a heavy metal used in rat poison." Tanya screamed. It was a sharp, piercing sound. "That is a lie. He forged it. He has been printing fake papers all week. He is insane." The judge ignored her. He picked up the report. He opened it. I watched his eyes scan the lines. I saw the moment he hit the red graph Frank had circled. His eyebrows shot up. He flipped to the second page, then the third. He looked at the signature at the bottom. "This is signed by Dr. Frank Miller," the judge said. "I know this man. He is the former chief medical examiner for the state." He is lying. Tanya shouted, her composure cracking. She took a step toward the bench. He is a friend of Henry's. They are conspiring together. And this, I continued, pointing to the pen. This is a voice recorder. My grandson Noah retrieved it from his father's pocket this morning. I reached out and pressed the play button. The courtroom fell deathly silent. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning and the beating of my own heart. Then the tinny voice of Tanya filled the cavernous room, amplified by the acoustics of the high ceiling. Who is going to believe you, Leo? You cannot even hold a spoon. And your father. Poor Henry. He tried to help you, but he is old and confused. He is sitting in a cell right now. Nobody is coming for you, Leo. Just close your eyes. It will all be over soon. I watched the judge's face. It went from curiosity to shock and finally to a cold, hard anger. He looked up from the device, his eyes locking onto Tanya. Tanya was not screaming anymore. She was frozen. The color had drained from her face, leaving her looking like a wax statue. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The arrogance, the smug superiority, it was all gone, stripped away by the sound of her own cruelty. Dr. Reeves was the first to move. He was a survivor, a cockroach who knew when the lights were about to come on. He took a slow step backward toward the side exit. He thought no one noticed. Bailiff the judge barked, his voice booming like a gavel strike. "Secure the doors. No one leaves this room." Reeves bolted. He abandoned all pretense of dignity. He shoved past the court reporter, knocking over her stand, and sprinted for the door. But the bailiff was faster. He tackled the doctor halfway down the aisle, slamming him into the pews. Reeves went down with a yelp of pain, his expensive suit tearing, his glasses skittering across the floor. Tanya stood alone. She looked at Reeves writhing on the ground. Then she looked at the judge, and finally, she looked at me. There was no remorse in her eyes. Only hatred. Pure, unadulterated hatred. "It is a deep fake," she hissed, pointing a shaking finger at the pen. "That is AI generated. He made it on a computer. You cannot prove that is my voice." Judge Harrison stood up. He towered over the bench, his black robes flowing like the wings of a dark angel. "Ms. Sullivan," he said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper, "you will remain silent." He turned to the bailiff, who was handcuffing Reeves. "Take Dr. Reeves into custody," the judge ordered, "and call the district attorney. Tell him I want immediate arrest warrants drawn up for attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. And take Miss Sullivan into custody as well." 2 more officers rushed in from the hallway, alerted by the commotion. They grabbed Tanya by the arms. She started to fight. She kicked and screamed, her carefully constructed mask shattering completely. "You cannot do this to me," she shrieked, her voice echoing off the walls. "I am the victim here. I am the wife. I have rights." "You have the right to remain silent," I said quietly, watching them drag her away. "And I suggest you use it." The judge looked down at me. He looked at the wet, muddy mess I had made of his courtroom. He looked at the exhaustion etched into every line of my face. And then he did something I had never seen a judge do. He nodded. A slow, respectful nod. "Mr. Sullivan," he said, "the court thanks you, and I am hereby issuing an emergency order transferring temporary guardianship of Leo Sullivan to you effective immediately. I am also ordering a police escort to accompany you to your son's residence to ensure his immediate transport to a secure medical facility." I felt my knees give way, not from weakness, but from relief. The adrenaline that had sustained me for the last 48 hours suddenly evaporated, leaving me trembling. I grabbed the edge of the bench to steady myself. "Thank you, Your Honor," I whispered. I turned around. Noah was still standing there next to Patricia Vance. He was staring at the empty space where his mother had been standing just moments ago. He looked small and fragile. I walked over to him and knelt down, ignoring the pain in my joints. I took his face in my hands. "It is over, Noah," I said. "We did it." Dad is going to be safe." He threw his arms around my neck and buried his face in my wet coat. He cried then. Deep, racking sobs that shook his little body, releasing the terror he had been holding inside for weeks. I held him tight, staring at the doors of the courtroom. The nightmare was over. The storm had broken. Outside, the rain was still falling, but inside the air felt lighter. I had walked into this building a fugitive, a madman, a suspect. I was walking out, a father. Patricia Vance placed a hand on my shoulder. "My car is outside, Henry," she said softly. "Let us go get your son." I stood up, taking Noah's hand. We walked out of the courtroom, past the Wantis, saw the stunned clerks and the curious onlookers. I did not look back at the chaos we left behind. I only looked forward. To the hospital. To the antidote. To the long road of healing that lay ahead. But for the first time in a long time, I was not afraid of the future. Because I knew that no matter what came next, we would face it together. The Sullivan men were survivors, and we had just won the war. The chaos that erupted in the courtroom was unlike anything I had ever witnessed in 40 years of legal proceedings. It was not the orderly administration of justice, but the frantic, desperate scrambling of rats on a sinking ship. Tanya, who had stood so tall and imperious just moments ago, was now unraveling before my eyes. Her face, which she had composed into a mask of tragic beauty, was contorted into a grotesque grimace of panic. She lunged toward the bailiffs who were holding Dr. Reeves, not to help him, but to claw at his face. "It was him," she screamed, her voice cracking into a high-pitched wail that grated against the mahogany walls. "He made me do it. He told me Leo was suffering. He told me the medicine would help him sleep. I did not know it was poison. I am just a wife. I trusted the doctor. Please, Your Honor. You have to believe me. He manipulated me. He threatened to hurt Noah if I did not sign the checks." Dr. Reeves, who was currently pinned to the floor with a knee in his back, lifted his head. His glasses were gone and blood was trickling from his nose where it had hit the floor, but he found the breath to shout back. "You lying witch!" Reeves roared, spitting blood onto the carpet. "You came to me. You approached me at the gala. You asked for something untraceable. You said you were tired of waiting for him to die naturally. It was your idea to use the thallium. You ordered it. You paid for it. I have the emails, Tanya. I kept every single email in a cloud server you do not know about, because I knew you would try to frame me." The judge watched them with a look of utter revulsion. He did not bang his gavel. He did not call for order. He simply let them destroy each other. Let their own words tie the noose around their necks. "You are both disgusting," the judge said finally, his voice cutting through their screaming match like a blade of ice. "And you are both going to prison for a very long time." I watched them turn on each other, devouring their own alliance in seconds. It was pathetic, but it was not enough. I needed her to look at me. I needed her to know exactly why she had lost. I stepped forward. The bailiffs who were moving to cuff Tanya paused when they saw me approach. They saw the look in my eyes and stepped back, giving me space. Tanya stopped screaming. She looked at me, breathing heavily, her chest heaving. Her hair was wild, her mascara running down her cheeks in black streaks. She looked small. She looked like a child caught stealing from the cookie jar. Only the cookie jar was my son's life. "Henry," she whimpered, switching tactics instantly, trying to summon the ghost of the sweet daughter-in-law she had pretended to be for 10 years. "Henry, please. You know me. We spent Christmas together. I cooked for you. I am family. Tell them. Tell them I would never hurt Leo." I stood right in front of her. I was close enough to see the pores in her skin, close enough to smell the sour scent of her fear. I did not raise my hand. I did not raise my voice. I kept my hands in my pockets, and I looked her dead in the eye. "You are not family," I said, my voice low and steady. "You are a parasite. You looked at my son and you did not see a husband. You saw a bank account. You looked at my grandson and you did not see a child to protect. You saw a pawn to be used. Tanya flinched as if I had struck her. But I loved him, she lied, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an exit that did not exist. Stop it, I said sharply. Just stop. You made one fatal mistake, Tanya. You thought you were smarter than everyone else in the room. You thought because I was 70 years old that I was invisible. You thought I was weak. You thought I was just a senile old man who could be distracted with a fake smile and a glass of wine. I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a whisper that only she could hear. But you forgot who I was. You forgot that before I was a grandfather, I was the man who caught people like you for a living. I have spent 40 years looking into the eyes of liars, thieves, and murderers. I have caught fraudsters who were smarter than you, more careful than you, and far more dangerous than you. You thought you were playing a game against a helpless old man. But you were playing against a father. And you severely underestimated what a father will do to save his child. Tanya stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, wordlessly. The realization finally hit her. It was not bad luck. It was not an accident. It was me. I had dismantled her perfect plan brick by brick. Officer, I said, stepping back and nodding to the policeman. Get this filth out of my sight. No, Tanya shrieked as the cold metal cuffs clicked around her wrists. No, you cannot do this. My money, my house, it is mine. I earned it. She was still screaming about her money as they dragged her out the double doors. She did not ask about Leo. She did not ask about Noah. She only screamed about what she had lost. I turned away. She did not matter anymore. She was just a bad memory. Mr. Sullivan. It was the police captain who had entered with the judge's order. We have an escort ready. An ambulance is dispatched to your son's residence. We need to move now if we want to get him to the trauma center in time for the antidote. I nodded. Let's go. The ride to Leo's house was a blur of flashing lights and sirens. I sat in the front seat of the police cruiser, Noah next to me, holding my hand so tight, his knuckles were white. We did not speak. We just watched the city fly by. When we pulled up to the house, it looked different. It did not look like a prison anymore. It looked like a crime scene. Paramedics were already there, rushing through the front door with a stretcher. I ran inside, ignoring my aching legs. I found them in the living room. Leo was exactly where I had left him, slumped in his wheelchair. But he was breathing. Shallow, ragged breaths, but he was breathing. Dad Noah cried, running to his side. Leo opened his eyes. They were unfocused, cloudy with the poison, but they found us. He tried to lift his hand, but it fell back into his lap. Dad Noah whispered, grabbing his limp hand. It is okay. Grandpa fixed it. The bad people are gone. The paramedics worked fast, checking his vitals, inserting an IV line right there in the living room. His pulse is weak, one medic shouted. We need to load and go, now. I watched them lift my son onto the stretcher. He looked so fragile. My big, strong boy, who used to carry me on his shoulders when he was a teenager, was now wasting away. But he was alive. I climbed into the back of the ambulance with them. I sat by his head, stroking his hair just like I did when he was a little boy with a fever. Hang on, Leo, I whispered as the doors slammed shut and the engine roared to life. You just hang on, I got you. I am here, and I am not going anywhere. The siren wailed again, but this time it did not sound like an alarm. It sounded like a battle cry. We were racing against death, but for the first time in months, I knew we were going to win. Tanya was in chains, Reeves was broken, and my son was coming home. 6 months have passed since the gavel fell in that courtroom, and the rain that seemed to drown Seattle back then has finally given way to a glorious golden summer. I am sitting on a park bench, the wood warm against my back, watching a bright red kite dance against the azure sky. Holding the string is Noah. He is running across the grass, his laughter carrying on the breeze, a sound so pure it makes my heart ache in the best possible way. He is not the terrified boy hiding under a dining table anymore, or the trembling child handing me a secret note in the dark. He is 12 years old again, carefree, and light, his burden lifted, replaced by the simple joy of a summer afternoon. Next to me, sitting in his wheelchair, is Leo. He is finishing a vanilla ice cream cone, wiping a smudge from his lip with a napkin. The gray pallor of death that clung to him for so long is gone, replaced by the healthy flush of sun and life. He has gained 20 pounds. His hair, the hair I once carried in a Ziploc bag, as evidence, has grown back thick and dark. He is not fully healed yet. The thallium took a heavy toll on his nerves, and his legs are still weak, but the doctors say with physical therapy, he will walk by Christmas. He is 80% of the man he was, but he is 100% my son again. His mind is sharp. His humor is back. The fog of poison has lifted, revealing the man I raised, the man who built a company from nothing. We do not talk about them often. We try not to let their names pollute the air of our new life. But today, Leo asked. He wanted to know the final count. I told him the truth without sugarcoating it. Tanya will never see the outside of a prison cell again. The jury took less than 2 hours to convict her of attempted murder in the first degree, along with fraud and embezzlement. The judge showed no mercy, calling her crimes a betrayal of the highest order. She screamed as they read the verdict, blaming everyone but herself, right until the heavy steel doors slammed shut on her life sentence. All the assets she tried to steal have been recovered and put into a trust for Noah. And Dr. Reeves? He lost his medical license before the trial even began. He took a plea deal to avoid life in prison, turning on Tanya in the end, but he still got 20 years. He will be an old man when he gets out, if he survives at all. They are gone, Leo, I said quietly. Erased. They are just ghosts now, locked away in concrete boxes where they can never hurt anyone ever again. Leo reached out and took my hand. His grip was firm. The tremors that used to shake his whole body are completely gone. Thank you, Dad, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You gave me a second life. I did not know if I could ever trust again, but you showed me what real loyalty looks like. I squeezed his hand back, fighting the sting of tears in my eyes. I did not do it alone, I said, nodding toward Noah, who was now wrestling with the kite string, trying to keep it aloft in the shifting wind. We did it together. We are the survivors. You fought to stay alive inside that dark room in your mind. Noah fought his fear to get the truth to me, and I just did what any father would do. I refused to accept the lie. I sat there watching the sun begin its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the clouds in shades of purple and orange. The park was filling with families, mothers pushing strollers, fathers throwing frisbees. I watched them and I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. I thought about everything I had lost and everything I had found. I used to think my life was over. I used to think I was just a retired old man waiting for the end invisible to the world. But this war, this terrible, beautiful war for my family, taught me something profound. It taught me that age does not make you obsolete. It gives you experience. It gives you the ability to see things others miss. I looked at Leo and then at Noah. They were my legacy. Not money, not houses, not awards. Them. I realized then that family is not defined by blood or marriage certificates. It is not defined by who sits at your dinner table or who shares your last name. Family are the people who are willing to walk through fire for you when the rest of the world turns away. Family are the people who notice when you are fading. Family are the people who break down doors and bluff billionaires and run through rainstorms just to keep you breathing. It is about showing up when it is inconvenient. It is about listening when everyone else is talking. It is about fighting when everyone else has surrendered. I stood up and released the brake on Leo's wheelchair. The metal clicked, a sound of finality. "Ready to go home, son?" I asked. Leo looked up at me and smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes, crinkling the corners in a way I had not seen in years. "Yes, Dad," he said. "Let's go home." I called out to Noah, and he came running, his face flushed with joy, reeling in his kite, until it was just a splash of red in his hand. We walked together down the paved path, the three of us moving toward the sunset. I am Henry Sullivan. I am 71 years old. I have a bad back and a smaller bank account than I did last year. But as I pushed my son toward the car with my grandson skipping beside us, I realized I was the richest man in the world. I had saved my pack. I had stared down the darkness, and I had won. And that is all a father can ever ask for. As we reached the car, Noah tugged on my sleeve, stopping me. He looked up, his expression serious in a way that reminded me painfully of myself 40 years ago. "Grandpa," he asked, his voice low, "how did you know? How did you know about the mud on the doctor's shoe? How did you know they were lying when everyone else believed them?" I looked at Leo. He was watching us, a small, proud smile on his face, nodding slowly, as if giving me permission. It was a heavy question for a 12-year-old. I didn't want Noah to grow up with my cynicism, seeing shadows in every corner. I didn't want him to look at the world and only see the cracks. But I also knew I wouldn't be around forever to check the locks and read the fine print. I knelt down, ignoring the pop in my knees, until I was eye level with him. "It is not magic, Noah," I said softly. "It is about looking. Most people just see what they want to see. They see the smile, not the cold eyes. They hear the promise, not the hesitation. To find the truth, you have to be willing to see the things that make you uncomfortable." Noah processed this, his brow furrowed. "Can you teach me?" he asked. "I don't want to be tricked again. I want to protect Dad, too." That sentence, "I want to protect Dad," hit me harder than any blow I had ever taken. He wasn't asking for toys. He was asking for armor. I placed my hand on his shoulder, feeling the sturdy frame of a boy who had been forced to grow up too fast. "Okay," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Lesson 1 starts tomorrow, but we use it for protection, never for control. We use it to find the light, not just the darkness. Deal." "Deal," he said, shaking my hand, with a grip that was getting stronger every day. We got into the car, the three of us. As I started the engine, I looked in the rearview mirror. I didn't just see a recovering victim and a scared child anymore. I saw a team. I realized then that my job wasn't done. I had saved their lives, yes, but now I had a new mission: to teach them how to ensure no one could ever take those lives away from them again. This story is a reminder to every single one of us to trust our instincts. We often dismiss that small voice in our heads that tells us something is wrong, especially when it concerns the people we love. We assume doctors are always right. We assume family members always have our best interests at heart. But blind trust can be dangerous. Henry saved his son not because he had superpowers, but because he paid attention. He noticed the shaking hands. He noticed the fear in his grandson's eyes. He noticed the mud on a shoe. Love is not just a feeling, it is an action. It requires vigilance. If you see something in your family that does not feel right, do not be afraid to ask questions. Do not be afraid to be the difficult one. Because sometimes being the difficult one is the only thing that stands between a loved one and tragedy. Your intuition is your greatest weapon, so use it. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat and reminded you of the power of a father's love, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I have so many more stories to share with you, stories about justice, survival, and the hidden truths of everyday life. And I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a gut feeling that saved you or someone you love? Tell me your story in the comments below. I read every single one. Thank you for listening, and remember to watch out for each other. See you in the next story.